Week number 1 is in the books, which means it is time to fill out waivers for week number 2 for your season-long fantasy football leagues. We are here to answer your questions, get you set for those waivers, and try to get those pickups you need to make a run this year. This is the Waiver Wire Q&A right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for NumberFire.com, joined here once again by JJ Zachariason. He, of course, is the editor-in-chief of NumberFire and FanDuel. JJ, week 1 is wrapped up, and unfortunately, kind of on a bummer note, with Raheem Mostert announcing today he is done for the year, having surgery to repair that knee. So kind of a down note to open things up here. But overall, how did things go for you in week number 1?
It was fine enough, I'd say. You know, there's a lot of surprises. It was draining, that's for sure. I mean, I do the live stream noon every Sunday on the FanDuel YouTube channel, and that was right after we saw the sermon news of him being inactive, and that was kind of a shock. It was surprising, and so you know, I'm scrambling, going to all my waiver wires and adding Elijah Mitchell as fast as I can before I have to get on that live stream. And then fortunately on the live stream, I talked up Elijah Mitchell instead of JaMychal Hasty. We'll talk about that a little bit and why my brain was going towards Mitchell as opposed to Hasty. And then obviously, you know, results were results, and it ended up the way that it did. Let's just put it out there that Elijah Mitchell would not be in this position, and we wouldn't be talking about him for probably 15 minutes of the show if not for that Raheem Mostert injury. I think that's really important to get out there, because Raheem Mostert was going to play in front of, I mean, we saw that at the beginning of the game, and Mostert was already looking like he was going to have a very efficient day. But, you know, it's just a situation where we see a split backfield a lot with San Francisco. But yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting week. I think we learned a lot in week 1, and hopefully we get some good questions here for the show.
Absolutely. Well, let's start things off here by talking about a couple of guys who are pretty popular right now, by talking to Julian on YouTube, asking about Tyson Williams and Elijah Mitchell, both available in his PPR league. And I think this one's interesting because, like, Mitchell himself is kind of a no-brainer. You know, we'll talk about free agent auction budget or free agent budget and stuff like that. But like, if you got the number 1 waiver, you're burning it on Elijah Mitchell. But Tyson Williams being there as well makes it a bit more interesting. So JJ, who are you prioritizing here? I mean, obviously you'd want to add both, assuming you've got the spot to do so. But who would you rank higher between Tyson Williams and Elijah Mitchell?
It's really, really tough. Like, this is a very, very tough question, because here's where my brain is at right now with this. Is with Tyson Williams, I sort of feel like there's a better floor there than Elijah Mitchell. And I mean that from the standpoint of, we know that Baltimore is going to have a lot of running back rushes. We know they're going to be run heavy. Not that San Francisco's not, but we know that Baltimore is definitely going to be. From a competition standpoint, I'm not that. I mean, I do think that we're going to see basically like a 50-50 type split more than likely, or maybe we get some other guy sprinkled in, like maybe Le'Veon Bell ends up being better than we expect or something like that. But Latavius Murray looks like he's going to see a decent workload in that backfield as well. But regardless, I would say that Tyson Williams has a better floor. The worry that I have with Williams is, like I just said, there's going to be that split, but also Lamar Jackson takes away some of that touchdown equity as well, close to the goal line, right? With Elijah Mitchell, the risk is that they do what they do, and that's just rotate these running backs around, and they're very unpredictable each week. You know, Jeff Wilson eventually comes back and he gets involved. Trey Sermon, maybe he's active and next week and he just blows up and he's awesome. So there's more volatility with Elijah Mitchell. I think that, you know, if Tyson Williams is available in your league right now, that probably means that it's a shallow league. And if it's a shallow league, you probably want to chase ceiling a little bit more than floor. And I would argue that Mitchell is probably the ceiling play just because there's a little bit more ambiguity. But I'll say overall that it's close. It just depends on what your team really needs. Neither guy's going to probably catch a ton of passes either. Although Tyson Williams had a decent target share this past week. But that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I don't think there's this like obvious choice between these two guys right now. But I do think Mitchell has a little bit more intriguing upside, because you have that potential that what if Elijah Mitchell, you know, is this workhorse, right? I think in most cases, in most leagues, like 12 plus teams, probably want to just go Tyson Williams. It's a safer bet. But if you're in like a 10-team league and if he's on your waiver wire right now, I mean, Elijah Mitchell is probably like your RB6 anyway, so you might as well just chase that ceiling.
I think the other good thing with Tyson Williams, I agree, where the upside favors Mitchell, but the floor favors Williams. The other thing that works for Williams, though, is that his competition is guys who've been cut recently. Whereas with Mitchell, he's looking at JaMychal Hasty, who's a guy they carried the entire preseason. They brought in Kerryon Johnson, but also Trey Sermon is there. So I feel like the competition for touches is tougher for Mitchell, which goes to what you said of the floor is better for Williams, but I do think that the path to upside potentially more clear for Mitchell as well. Let's talk about some free agent budget here because I had a lot of questions, one of which came from Ben. Ben on YouTube saying, hey, JJ and Jim, I have Sermon, but thinking of picking up Mitchell. How much of your free agent budget would you spend out of 100? We also had a question out of $200. So from a percentage perspective, JJ, in a vacuum, obviously this is very league dependent, league size dependent, situation dependent, but like, what's your like baseline number for Elijah Mitchell from a percentage perspective?
Yeah, this question has been everywhere in the fantasy football world today, and it makes a lot of sense as to why. I mean, people are using free agent budgets, and they want answers, and I understand that. You alluded to this, Jim. Every league is going to be different in terms of how you spend on these guys. Number one, you have to worry about how your league typically spends. If it's a shire league, then you don't have to go as hard on these guys. But if you know that there's some pretty aggressive players in your league, then you might have to go a little bit harder in terms of trying to get a guy like Elijah Mitchell. But then you also mentioned, how big your league is. That matters too, because if it's a league that has a lot of players rostered already, that means the waiver wire is thin, which means you need to spend more to get these players. So if it's like a 14 plus team league, then you should go a lot harder than if it's a non 14 plus team league. If it's a 10 team league or something like the question that we got earlier from Julian, I would assume that in a league like that, you could probably go like 20-25% on Elijah Mitchell, and that's reasonable. Whereas if it's a 14 team league, I think that you can go 50 to 60% on Elijah Mitchell, and it's very reasonable to do that too. So if we sort of meet in the middle in a 12 team league, I think the sweet spot is like, and this is going to be a fairly wide range, so I apologize, but I think the sweet spot's probably the 30 to 50% range for Mitchell. But again, it's going to vary a lot. The way that I'm also looking at this, Elijah Mitchell, the reason why I went after him when the news broke about Trey Sermon is because during the evaluation process, during the draft, Mitchell, when he landed in San Francisco, he popped as someone who literally, he's like a Raheem Mostert clone, right? He's like the same guy. I mean, they're the same size. They're both really, really fast. He ran like a 4.35 40 at his pro day, and that's very similar to what Raheem Mostert did at the combine. They're both very fast. They're both leaner. They're not necessarily these like bigger bodied players, but they fit what Kyle Shanahan likes, and they fit that offense really well. So think of it this way. I mean, Raheem Mostert was like a 7th round pick for the most part in most 12 team leagues. That's probably what you're most likely getting out of Elijah Mitchell, is to sort of play it that way. I think that he's going to be involved. I think he could be the 1A in that offense. And as a result of that, I wouldn't fault anyone for going even higher than the 50% mark if they really believe in the talent.
One other thing to consider with your waiver budget is who you're dropping to pick up Mitchell, because that matters too, because you're paying not just to add him, but also to drop the other person. Like if you're dropping a valuable player, maybe you want to lower that free agent budget number because there is a larger cost tied to there as well. One more question here on Mitchell from Jeremy asking, would you rather have Mitchell than Sermon rest of the way? Now, this could go one of two ways because like the 49ers have made their choice very clear who they prefer here, but also Sermon, we saw him get some pass catching in the preseason. He does have that draft capital tied to him. The one thing that I would say is that draft capital doesn't seem to matter too much when it comes to the 49ers, both with like Brandon Ayuk, Dante Pettis back in the day, Deebo Samuel, relative
Joe Williams.
Yeah, Joe Williams, third round pick they traded up for, stuff like that. So I think that for me, I care a lot about draft capital. I think I care a bit less with this specific team. Would you rather Mitchell rest of the way than Sermon?
This is such a hard one to answer. It's such a hard one to answer. I think because there's two lines of thought here. Okay. I think that in one hand, you could make the argument that the reason that they had Sermon as a healthy scratch was because of the special teams issue, and they would be fine with the other running backs they would have for that day. Right. But the reason that you could also, on the other hand, say they went with Elijah Mitchell because they like Mitchell more. And I do think that Mitchell plays that Raheem Mostert and can play that Raheem Mostert role well. And because we already have evidence of them literally choosing Elijah Mitchell over Trey Sermon here in week 1, I would probably rather go Mitchell than Sermon. And I just think it's logical to think that way right now. The way that I'm thinking about that though is more like a 55 to 45 split as opposed to like I'm all in on Elijah Mitchell. It's a very, very close, I can make an argument either way, but I'd probably lean Mitchell just because we've seen them make a decision. We've seen an action. And usually when we see those actions, that's when we should take action.
And Jeremy, one thing I would say is if you're deciding to drop Sermon from Mitchell, I would try to hold both. I would try to hold on to Sermon if you can, try to find someone else, see how it shakes out and react based on that once we have more information. Let's move now to some other questions here, not Elijah Mitchell related. One from Kevin. Should I pick up the Browns defense against the elite Tyrod Taylor Texans offense or stick with the Packers for another week? Any other streamers to consider? I will mention it is a Tyrod Taylor revenge game, and I feel like that's going overlooked this week. So are you willing to risk it with the Browns against the Tyrod Taylor revenge game, or are you going Packers versus number one quarterback in football, Jared Goff?
I can't remember. Are the Browns at home this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
They are 12 and a half point favorites.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a really similar situation because Green Bay is at home too. I'm going to go Cleveland here, though, because I just trust the defense more. It's a better defense throughout, and they played better. I mean, I understand that they still weren't flawless, but they also played against arguably the best offense in the league in week one. And I don't really think that the Texans' offense is necessarily significantly better or any different than what, from an opponent standpoint, versus what we're going to get from Detroit. And Jared Goff, I mean, I know he played in a negative game script. He was playing in a lot of garbage time. Your boy did not look bad in that. I mean, he was not terrible against San Francisco. He did throw that pick six though, which kind of ruined things. Yeah. And the Detroit offensive line on paper can be good too.
Yeah. Panay played really well. Shocker that a good tackle moved back to left tackle, played well. Who could have guessed that?
Yeah, exactly. So I would go with Cleveland over Green Bay. Green Bay is a very good streaming option too. Those are two top 5 options this week.
Absolutely, for sure. Let's talk to Shake and Bake 145 over on YouTube. Rank these waiver receivers. Got Emmanuel Sanders, who was overthrown a big deep ball by Josh Allen by 15 yards. Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler with the injury to Jerry Jeudy, or Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I would say all these guys are very interesting, JJ, and I have no objections to any of them. Who would you rank highest from that group?
I'm going to rank these guys Emmanuel Sanders first because I think that he's just, I liked him going into week one. He was a 15 transactions guy going into week one. Gabe Davis was banged up a little bit in that game. That's why the snaps looked the way that they looked. But even still, Emmanuel Sanders was slotted to be the number 2 guy, or the top perimeter guy outside of Stephon Diggs on that team entering the season. And they're going to bounce back. They're going to be a better passing offense than they were against Pittsburgh. They struggled a little bit against Pittsburgh last year too, offensively. So I'm not like that shocked at the outcome. So I'm going to go Emmanuel Sanders first. I'm actually going to go. So obviously Jerry Jeudy is going to be back eventually, right? So it's a 4 to 6 week injury. I'm not going to go with one of the Green Bay, or not one of the Denver wide receivers. I'm going to go to the Green Bay guy. MVS, really, really awesome low-key waiver ad this week. Because Green Bay was awful offensively, didn't score a single touchdown in that game against New Orleans. But MVS had like a 22% target share. He had a lot of air yards in that game. And there was a lot of talk out of Packers camp before the season that this could be like a big year for him. And so just given the peripherals that we saw in week one, we know that there's going to be a bounce back with that offense. They're going to put up 3 points every week. I'm going to go MVS number 2. I wrote up Tim Patrick over Hamler, but then there's reports say that Hamler was playing with the ones, and I can go either direction there. I'd probably go Patrick as sort of the safer play of the two. But I think that Emmanuel Sanders and MVS are better options off the wire this week.
Yeah, with MVS, the Saints basically said no, you're not going to be as deep. And not every team's going to be smart enough to play MVS that way. So I think that he's going to have those pop weeks he had last year. I agree. The camp buzz is positive and interesting for him. KJ Hamler, the drop touchdown, big bummer there. Teddy put it right in the money, but Hamler couldn't quite haul it in. But I think all those guys are viable pickups this week. Let's talk to Alvin and get a temperature check for you on Najee Harris. He's asking, would you trade Miles Sanders for Najee Harris? And I feel like this one is an obvious yes. So I want to use it as like a jumping off point for you, JJ. Talk about Najee based on what you saw from him in week number 1.
Yeah, look, there's obvious concern about the Pittsburgh offensive line, and it sort of came to fruition, and we saw it all with our eyes in week 1. It's a not only like sort of a makeshift offensive line, but it's an offensive line that hasn't played together very long. And so, I think that we see that improve as the season goes on. Najee Harris wasn't efficient, but he did see all of the running back touches in that backfield because he played 100% of the team snaps in week 1. You're not going to get that kind of bell cow workload and those peripherals very easily. Whereas Miles Sanders, we've only seen Sanders, and he was fine. I mean, look, Miles Sanders is a good running back, but we've not seen Miles Sanders, which I think is a concern, or could be a concern eventually, in a negative game script, right? Because we saw in that game, they used Kenneth Gainwell a decent bit as a receiver. And I think when
the 2-minute drill, they went to Kenneth Gainwell over Miles Sanders.
Exactly. And if and when we see this Philadelphia team, which didn't have a high win total entering the season because they're not that great, if and when this Philadelphia team is in these negative game scripts, we might see a lot more Kenneth Gainwell. So to me, it's obviously Najee, just given the workload. I know people are going to say, oh, he's inefficient. The Steelers offense doesn't look very good. I mean, they get Vegas this week. This could be a get-right game for this offense. They're at home. Vegas, short week, traveling across to the East Coast for a
emotional game on Monday.
Yeah, there's just so much working in the Steelers' offense's favor that I think that this would be the get-right game for Najee in the offense. So this is the time to buy him.
Yeah, Alvin, I would be broadly looking to see what you can get for Sanders right now, because I was very concerned about his workload. I liked Miles Sanders going into the year. Very concerned personally right now. Let's talk to Joshua. One quick Elijah Mitchell question here. He'd have to drop Will Fuller or Laviska Shenault to pick up Mitchell. Would you drop one of those two guys? And if so, who? Because those are pretty good dudes who I'd like to have on my team if I could have the choice.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty shallow league. 10-man, half PPR. I mean, of the two, I'd drop Fuller over Shenault, but it just depends on, I talk about this on the late round podcast a lot, but the way that you manage your bench should be a reflection on your starting lineup. If your starting lineup is weak at running back, then you probably need to add Elijah Mitchell and drop Will Fuller. If your starting lineup is not weak at running back, then you don't need Elijah Mitchell and you can just keep those wide receivers.
Yep. Let's go to Jamar here. 2-part question. He is heavy at wide receiver, lost Ryan Fitzpatrick. Would you trade Corey Davis for Matthew Stafford? Or his other question was, would you pick up Teddy? So would you trade Corey Davis, a high usage wide receiver for a team willing to sling it downfield a bit last week, for Matthew Stafford? Or would you stream with Teddy Bridgewater versus the Jaguars this week?
Yeah, I mean, look, Stafford's going to have a good year, but he's still in that bucket of pocket passers who likely won't have a top 5 ceiling in fantasy football. It's just the way that it is. I mean, Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford both lit it up on the football field this past week, and they were still not top 5 options in fantasy football, and it has everything to do with the rushing component and what we see with the rushing component. And so, I'm not going to be aggressive in getting one of those players. I would rather just embrace streaming for a little bit. And then if things just get really, really tough, then sure, pull the trigger and make a move like that. But Corey Davis is going to see a high target share this year. He could be in store for a decent season. And I just, and Teddy Bridgewater this week is in a really good spot. And so I just don't think that it's necessary to do that right now.
Yeah, I would go Teddy this week, see what happens from there. Dust Prov is saying, is Jermichael Hasty worth stashing? We talked about it in passing with that 49er situation. It seems like he may be the preferred guy on passing downs in this current setup here over Elijah Mitchell. Mitchell ran 10 routes on Sunday, didn't get any targets, whereas Hasty got a couple. So would you also add Mitchell? Obviously, you're not dumping like free agent budget out there for him relative to the other guys, but would you take Hasty and kind of see how things sort out?
Yeah, if I'm able to, if I have a bench where, the last guy on my bench isn't someone like Latavius Murray or something like that. If it's someone like De'Ami Brown, who you just threw a flyer at last week just to see what would happen, who didn't have terrible usage, don't get me wrong, but it's just not the best situation anymore without Ryan Fitzpatrick. If it's someone like De'Ami Brown, sure, go ahead and stash the running back. We know that San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan rotate their running backs a good bit. Elijah Mitchell, by the way, this past week, he had an 86 to 87% running back rush share. That was the 4th highest that we've seen from a San Francisco running back since Kyle Shanahan became head coach there. So there's something to that, but it also tells you that they never give their one running back all the touches, which means a guy like Hasty could step in and see more work than we're projecting. So yeah, I think that he's everyone's going to be spending a lot for Elijah Mitchell, which they should. But if you can get Hasty for like $1, then go ahead.
Yeah, let's get a temperature check here on Aaron Jones after that rough week last week. Milo's asking, should they trade Aaron Jones and for Robert Woods? Other receivers are Terry McLaurin and Brandon Ayuk, making them feel like they need to make a move. I think one factor weighing in here is that the receivers on waivers are not too bad this week. If we have guys like MVS kind of lingering out there, I think that's pretty intriguing. Robert Woods also did not run as many routes as Van Jefferson. Yeah. Kind of a concern for me. I also like Aaron Jones, so I think you know where I stand here. JJ, where do you sit? Aaron Jones versus Robert Woods.
Yeah, easily Aaron Jones. I understand it was a rough day for Green Bay players, but don't sell low right now. And as you noted, Robert Woods was not utilized the way that we would want him to be utilized. And because they have Stafford, sometimes we see this where teams upgrade their quarterback position. Sorry, Jim, I know you're a Goff truther. They upgrade their quarterback position, and we see a lot more players involved in that. This is why Tom Brady's so good at playing football, is because he knows how to go through his progressions and get the ball out to open players. And sometimes that's the fifth option, on a certain play. And we saw that distribution happen with the Rams in week 1. So there's going to be probably a little bit more volatility, maybe outside of Cooper Kupp just because him and Matthew Stafford are clearly besties. They're eating breakfast together every day, evidently. So, aside from Cooper Kupp, I just don't know. There's might be more volatility than we expect from some of these pass catchers in the Rams offense. So, yeah, I mean, this one's still easily Aaron Jones for me. Aaron Jones is going to go ballistic this week. The whole Green Bay offense is just going to go absolutely nuts this week.
I hope so, as someone who needs them to pick things up here. Let's talk to Ryan. He's asking, for deeper leagues, is Zach Moss still worth a bench spot? Zach Moss, a healthy scratch this past week. The Bills opened up in a 5-receiver set. So who needs a running back when you can just do that, or have Isaiah McKenzie as your running back, apparently. Would you keep Zach Moss in a deeper league specifically?
Yeah, in a deeper league, I would. I mean, here's the other thing, too, is that when you see coaches make a decision and then the outcome of that decision, because they're results based. I mean, it's just the way that humans think, and it's definitely the way that NFL coaches think. When the result of that decision that they made is not a good one, which for the Bills, it was not, because the offense didn't look very good and they lost the game. You have to imagine that something changes. And so, I mean, I think that they need a bruiser in that backfield, even though I'm not like this, get all good running backs and running backs matter a whole lot in football and blah, blah, blah. They still probably need some sort of bruiser, because they were really, it's just Devin Singletary and Matt Breida back there. And Josh Allen, but he's obviously, you can't rely on him to just run the football 15 times a game. So yeah, I think that Moss is still worth a bench spot.
Yeah, I do too, because there's still a lot to be decided with the way that backfield shakes out. Let's talk to Raymond, saying, JJ, you mentioned in your podcast that there are quite a few tight end pickup options. Thoughts on Cole Kmet? They already have Allen Robinson, but I think the good thing here is Robinson and Kmet don't really cannibalize each other too much. So I wouldn't worry too much about that personally. But thoughts on Cole Kmet broadly entering week number 2?
He's fine. He's a streamer this week, I think. I mean, I could have thrown him in the bucket that I mentioned on that show. I mentioned Tyler Conklin was even one of the guys that I mentioned. So yeah, he's probably like in the Tyler Conklin tier where they're going to run a decent amount of routes. He's probably going to be utilized a little bit more, but the situation offensively isn't as good as long as Andy Dalton's under center. And I would argue that even when Justin Fields is under center, it's not going to be like, I think that people, I mean, hopefully it does, because I love Justin Fields, but I think people assume that all the pass catchers are going to get significantly better and it's going to be amazing. And they will probably have a higher ceiling week to week, but there's going to be some growing pains. And we historically have seen pass catchers not do nearly as well with rookie quarterbacks than with veterans. And I'm not saying that he's absolutely an upgrade over Andy Dalton. He should be starting for the Bears. I'm just saying that Cole Kmet is not going to be this automatic plug and play tight end. If you're on your waiver wire, I still would be looking at a guy like Dalton Schultz or something, just in an offense, no more Michael Gallup for a little bit. And he should just be peppered in general. Both tight ends, honestly, are viable. Correct. Because they both had pretty similar peripherals. But, like a Dalton Schultz or like an Adam Troutman who saw a 30% target share, I think those guys are just a little bit more attractive to me right now than Cole Kmet.
And I think that we saw the Cowboys run some more 2 tight end sets after Gallup got hurt too. So I think that helps both Schultz and Jarwin with that regard. Let's talk to Luis. He's asking, should I drop Latavius Murray for Sony Michel? They have Darrell Henderson on their team. Latavius obviously got some work, especially late in that game on Monday. And now as an extra week with the team, Sony Michel, 3 snaps, I believe, in week number 1. So would you drop Latavius for Sony Michel?
No, I wouldn't. And I'm not a big handcuffer either, because here's the thing. If Sony Michel starts to dig into Darrell Henderson's workload, you're not going to start both of those players. You're still going to just start one of those guys. You're really just saying, I don't know if Darrell Henderson's going to stay healthy, which is fair. But right now I'm trying to get, this part of the season, I'm not trying to play for safety. I'm trying to play for a ceiling. I'm trying to get guys who could be true RB2s and plug and play guys each week. And that's still in the range of outcomes for Latavius Murray. And if it is in the range of outcomes for Sony Michel, that means that Darrell Henderson is not going to do well, which means that your team doesn't look as favorable. It's a floor play. That's what handcuffing is. And I want more of a ceiling play. So no, keep Latavius Murray, especially after the week 1 usage. Like you said, Sony Michel has had 1 touch, I think, in that game.
Yeah. And it's not like Michelle's trade was recent. That was a while ago now. So it's not a situation where they're like ramping him up, I wouldn't think. Let's talk to Jake. He's asking, he's decided between dropping Tony Pollard, Sony Michel, Devin Singletary, or James White for Elijah Mitchell. Between those guys, who would you drop, JJ?
Probably Sony Michel, who we just talked about. I mean, you can make the case maybe for Singletary only because the upside probably just isn't.
He could play 90% of the snaps and not get double-digit points. Like, that's the rule for Devin Singletary. There is a hard cap no matter how much he plays.
Yeah, and James White got pretty good usage in week 1, all things considered. And the Damian Harris fumble, who knows how that changes things in that backfield. So I would go Michel, drop him first, but then, next would probably be Singletary, honestly.
Okay, let's go to Johnny. He's asking, should I trade Damian Harris for Mike Evans and Shellnut? I assume that's Chenault. I love it. I wanted to ask it mostly because of that. It made me laugh. Thoughts on this trade, but also Damian Harris, who had really good usage, but also fumbled late. I want to hear your thoughts on Damian Harris, but also this trade.
Yeah, so I was down on Harris entering the season versus consensus. He was still a top 30 running back in my eyes. I'm not saying like completely avoid him. He's going to be trash. But people were like really, really high on Damian Harris. And my hesitation was if you look at New England's running back history with Bill Belichick over the last 10 years, it's been, hey, if you're a 200 plus attempt rusher, you're not seeing any volume through the air. And then vice versa. They've had James White. They've had Danny Woodhead. They've had these guys, Shane Vereen, these guys catching passes out of the backfield and playing that role. The good news is Damian Harris got some work through the air in that game.
Didn't look bad in his passing game reps either. I'll say that.
Did not look bad. And there's not many there's not like alphas in that offense to throw to take away a giant target share either. So I don't mind. I mean, Damian Harris stock to me, despite that fumble, who knows what happens after that fumble, but despite that fumble, Damian Harris stock is up for me. And I'm someone who's been, down on Harris, as I noted. Would I trade him though for Mike Evans and Shellnut? Yeah, I would trade him, assuming Shellnut is actually Chenault.
No. Shellnut over Chenault. Definitely for me.
Some random tight end that we've never heard of. Yeah, I would still do that trade. I think I would take Mike Evans for Damian Harris, like period right now. Right. Like just that. But the fact that you're getting Shellnut on top of that. Yeah, I'd do it.
The good thing too with Harris is that Ramondre Stevenson also fumbled right away in that game. And like, I'm not sure he's played after that. So it could be JJ Taylor could get run at some point, but like, I think that does give Harris a bigger cushion for that job. Let's talk Michael Gallup here. Obviously he's gonna be out for, I think 3 to 5 weeks there. Would you drop Gallup for Sterling Shepard, JJ?
I mean, if you don't have an IR spot, if you need immediate, here's how you approach this. If your team needs immediate production, sure. If you're just stashing Sterling Shepard and you might not use him for like 3 or 4 weeks, then I would just wait for Michael Gallup to come back because he's probably going to be a better fantasy asset. But I mean, to me, Sterling Shepard, if he's available, probably the best wide receiver option on the waiver wire. He's not very sexy. MVS is a little bit more interesting and fun and might have more upside, but Sterling Shepard's just the better play. And he's a good player too. He's just not as sexy of an ad. So I would probably, if you need the production, sure. If you don't need the production, I'd probably just hold tight and hope for Gallup to heal and get back on the field.
Yeah, because Gallup had pretty good usage before he got hurt. So if you can hold him, I would try to do that. Big Bad Bosco, talking about a couple guys we had not discussed yet. Ramondre Stevenson, would you drop him for Tony Jones? Tony Jones, I know it was like a lot of garbage time, but again, looked good offensive line. Alvin Kamara may have played every snap in the first quarter of that game. I think I remember reading that somewhere. So not sure what his usage will be in like a more neutral script, but hey, looked fine. You attached to that Saints offense. Would you drop Stevenson for Tony Jones?
Yeah, by the way, Tony Jones is one of those guys where you can't say his name without saying his full name. It's Tony Jones all the time. But yeah, I would take Jones over Stevenson just because he's already seeing more work in his backfield. The offense is just as attractive, if not more. And then he has the upside, the flex, the handcuff plus flex appeal. If something ends up happening to Alvin Kamara. So yeah, I would take Tony Jones over Ramondre Stevenson.
All right, quick one here. Sorry to bring it up, JJ. What do you do about Brandon Ayuk? We were in a dynasty league facing each other, and I only won because of Ayuk. And if Tyson Williams had scored again last night, I'd have been toast. So sorry. I'll let you answer this one. And I'll crawl back in my shell.
I think honestly, and I didn't put this in my 15 transactions column or podcast today, but I think Ayuk is kind of a buy.
Yeah.
I don't like buying injured players, and I think that the hammy had something to do with what happened in week 1, and there's all these reports coming out now that Ayuk isn't like ready to be an NFL. Like, get out of here. We saw him last year be the alpha on that team. He was dominant whenever he got a chance. So I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy what I saw, last season, what the numbers said last season. He has good draft capital. He was a good prospect, all of the above. Really fits this Kyle Shanahan offense too, and his yak ability. I just have a hard time assuming that Trent Sherfield is going to play above Brandon Ayuk in the year of our Lord 2021. It just does not seem like a very reasonable thing to assume. So I'm going to say buy Ayuk. Maybe don't start him this week and not feel as confident in him this week, but I think Ayuk is still someone that I want rostered on my fantasy teams.
I do have Trent Sherfield in that dynasty league though, so I wouldn't mind if we let Trent Sherfield eat. Free Trent Sherfield in the 49ers offense. That's all we got for JJ for today, because we're going to send him off. We're going to transition now to MLB, but JJ, obviously, your podcast's already posted for the 15 transactions this week up on Number Fire as well. Where can people find all that?
Yeah, so just search for the Late Round Podcast. Anywhere podcasts can be found. I'll have a 10 trend show dropping tomorrow morning, then a sleeper show, then a mailbag show. And then on the FanDuel YouTube channel, Sunday at noon, I will be answering start sit questions. And, just a little teaser. I mean, I got to do this just to promote it a little bit, but I did tell people to add Elijah Mitchell on that show.
Could have been ahead of it.
Yeah. And so you could have been ahead of it if you tuned in. So definitely check that out, noon Eastern on Sunday.
All right. Find JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB and check out the Late Round Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to JJ. We'll back with it once again next week to get you set for week number 2. But let's transition now into today's daily fantasy baseball Q&A right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Get those questions in no matter where you are watching, and we'll answer them live here on air to get you set for Wednesday or Tuesday night slate of MLB DFS. Let's take a look at the slate over here on FanDuel.com. I think that for me, the question is, do you trust Garrett Cole's hamstring? And I do to an extent. I would put Garrett Cole number 2 on my list at pitcher for today. Number 1, though, is this guy, the smiling guy, Nathan Eovaldi. I think that he is number 1 on this list for today. Eovaldi facing the Mariners, who aren't really that bad of an offense, but they strike out a lot. And that's a good thing for Eovaldi. The strikeout rate for the Mariners against righties, 25%, 90 WRC plus. It is on the road, which is a downgrade for almost every pitcher, but still, I think Eovaldi is the number 1 pitcher for today. Cole, number 2. I will go with Marcus Stroman 3, followed by Frankie Montas, number 4. All 4 of those guys, to me, are viable for tonight. Let's start things off here by talking to Salvatore. Salvatore, saying Byron Buxton is a replacement level player. Salvatore, I'm pretty sure I won our bet last week, which was DJ Stewart versus Randall Grichuk. Grichuk went deep. So I think you owe me a Byron Buxton 2022 MVP thing in the chat here, Salvatore. I think you owe me. DJ says, Jim, a FanDuel note, a heads up that you can play Ticket Tuesday free play every Tuesday in the top 5,000 winners. Get a free entry to the NFL Sunday Million, and the top 10 winners get more prizes. Okay, I like that, DJ. So it's a free contest, it sounds like. So check that out in the FanDuel lobby to get an entry into the Sunday Million for this week. Thank you, DJ, for letting us know about that cool promotion. DJ says Boston got rocked by the Mariners last night. They did, and I used Eduardo Rodriguez as my pitcher. So that didn't go too great. And that's why, again, I respect Seattle. I think they're a decent offense. They can get things done, but I like the upside of Eovaldi personally with the strikeouts he can get in that matchup. So although we did see the Mariners do well last night, and they're not a bad offense, I do still think that Eovaldi grades out pretty well for today. Let's talk to Jerry. Favorite stacks for tonight: Houston, New York, Philadelphia. How would you take these? Jerry, I love all of them. Awesome job. I think they are the top 3 stacks for today. For me, it is the Yankees number 1 facing off with Alexander Wells. And Wells is kind of the prototype of what you want to stack against. Low strikeout rate, and the contact profile against him is superb in terms of the opposing stacks. And the Yankees been better this year versus lefties and righties. So I think the Yankees have to be number 1. Checking out the lineup here, we have Kyle Higashioka batting 9th. I'll take that. Luke Voigt batting 5th. at around $3,200. Joey Gallo batting 6th. I know it's been really rough recently, but I still think that Gallo worth some swipes here just because we know he has that double dong upside. We know that he can still go deep, even though the strikeout rate is like 97%. That 3% is still pretty good. So I think that Gallo, Voit, Higashioka, all those guys in play for tonight. Number 2 for me, Jerry, would be the Philadelphia Phillies, in part because their salaries are awesome. Let's pull up the Phillies here over on FanDuel. I scrolled past them because, of course, I did. And the lineup is out. Okay, let's put Dubo Herrera in there. Let's put Didi in there. Let's get Brad Miller in there. All right, we're cooking with gas. We're going to go back over here. We're going to put Eovaldi at pitcher and see what we have left. We have 35-20, baby. All right, let's go. Put Harper in there, 3,300 left. That means we can stack the Astros. We can stack the Yankees. We can go nuts. So I think to me, Jerry, the Phillies are number 2, and I'd put the Astros number 3, but all 3 tremendous stacks. So good job by you, Jerry, in your stacking selection for today. Diffuse says Jose Siri hero. Yes. Siri is a guy we looked into on yesterday's stream. I forgot that he was so good in AAA because they called him up it feels like 2 weeks ago, and they just sat him. And I was annoyed because I wanted to check him out eventually. And for some reason, that 2-week gap, I'd forgotten how good he was. And he was awesome. 2 homers last night. If he plays again today, I'm in on it. I will say, though, that, he's actually, the lineup is out. Jose Siri back in there, as is our guy, Chas McCormick. Oh, baby. We can go nuts on the Astros here. So let's go tinker. Let's put Siri in there. Let's put Mr. McCormick in there. And we're at 34.67, which means probably do whatever we want. I want to get Yordan Alvarez in there. I just like the power he's been showing recently, and also the salary is lower than it should be. Then we're choosing between Altuve, Bregman, and Correa. Talked this morning about how Bregman has been hitting the ball a lot better since he came off the IL, had a home run last night. I do like what he's been doing, but the problem is I've got the salary here, which means I can kind of pick whoever I like most between that group. So Correa, 226 ISO versus righties. Altuve is a 233. Bregman hitting the ball better recently. This number is misleading. He was pretty rough before he went on the IL. So I would say you can choose any of those guys and put them number 1. If I'm choosing one, it's probably going to be Altuve because I tend to have a pretty rough time filling out second base in general. So I feel like I'd go Altuve. And honestly, you could put Correa or Bregman over Alvarez as well if you need to fill outfield. But I think all those guys are great. So the Astros, very easy to stack for tonight, thanks to our hero, Jose Siri. Salvatore says, Byron Buxton, 2022 MVP. Awesome. Salvatore, your debt's been paid. You're free to comment as you please. DJ, Gibson against the Cubs. It's a good matchup, DJ, so I understand the inclination to give them a look here, but Gibson just doesn't get enough strikeouts. This is over his 8 starts with the Phillies, or 8 outings with the Phillies, 15% strikeout rate. I want to get more strikeouts elsewhere. Julia says, I am taking the Reds over the Pirates. Okay, the Reds here, let's see. Are they the main slate? I don't think they are. So I haven't studied this game because I haven't had time to study non-main slates recently because of MLB. That's Wade Miley versus Dylan Peters. Thumbs up, Julia. I agree. Let's talk to Salvatore. Do we like the Nats today? I don't dislike them, but I will say, Salvatore, I think there's a lot of volatility here. And the reason there's volatility is because Jesus Luzardo's had a couple of good starts recently. He's had 8 strikeouts in 2 of his past 3 starts. So he's been getting better. And I still potentially foolishly believe in the talent of Jesus Luzardo. So I'm hesitant to believe he's fully broken and can't be repaired. That's why I don't want to go all in the Nationals. But in between those 2 starts, did have one that was kind of a clunker still. So Lane Thomas is in play. You mentioned, or someone mentioned Ryan Zimmerman. Was it? Salvatore mentioned Ryan Zimmerman. I think he can go deep. Carter Kieboom's an option. Josh Bell's an option. Juan Soto can hit lefties as well. So I do think the Nationals are a play for stacking today, Salvatore. But because Luzardo has shown some life recently, not going to put them as high. Let's talk to Alvin. How do you rank the Giants as a stack? Didn't get to them in the top 5 or the top couple for today on the show, but I do think they're the pretty solid option facing Jake Arrieta. The reason I wasn't as high is because the park is always underwhelming. You know, they blasted my boy Yu Darvish last night, so they can still do well despite that. Arrieta has been getting some ground balls still. Another reason to be a little bit lower on the Giants, but they're a great offense. They're facing guys who really struggled, so I still think they're pretty high up there, Alvin. I just rank them beneath the Yankees, behind the Astros, behind the Phillies, But then they're kind of in that discussion with the Nationals as being a consideration there as well, and with the A's as being a potential option we could go to there. Savon, thoughts on a Boston stack? Boston facing Tyler Anderson. Anderson keeps the ball on the ground pretty well. Not a big strikeout guy. Does let him, he suppresses hard contact. Doesn't keep the ball on the ground. I don't think it's out of play, Savon. I think you could definitely go there. Not as high for me, just because I do think that Anderson does a good job of contact suppression, and I want other high-salaried stacks more, but I think they're an option, just not one I'm as high on. Savon, favorite value hitter. Jose Siri is up there, minimum salary. I like Brad Miller a lot. I like Didi Gregorius a lot. I like Odubel Herrera a lot. If you made me pick one, I'd probably go, where's Brad Miller hitting? Is he hitting 5th or 7th? He is 5th. Brad Miller, number 1 for tonight for you, Savon. DJ, would you stack the Angels against Giolito? He's been slumping. So he's coming off the IL. I think he just got activated literally today. Didn't have a rehab start. So you could play that angle and go with the Angels, but there aren't a lot of guys I want to use on the Angels. Giolito's pretty good, so I would be not going there personally. Savon asking for thoughts on an Atlanta stack and the White Sox. Let's go over here and check out the matchups. Braves facing John Gray. Don't really want to stack that. White Sox facing Packy Naughton. Great name. Gets a lot of ground balls. This is over his 2 starts in the majors. Really low fly ball rate at 16%. And he did get a lot of ground balls in the minors as well. So I think they're okay. Very good team versus lefties, obviously. But I'm not going to prioritize them because Naughton does a good job of getting ground balls. Savannah is asking for my favorite value starting pitcher. Don't really have one. I would say the lowest I want to go for today is Marcus Stroman at $9,000 because the drop-off after that is pretty steep. So to me, I would say Marcus Stroman at $9,000. I want that to be my floor. And I think the good thing here, Savannah, is that we've got good value options, both of the Phillies, and now with the Astros, we can use both McCormick and Siri. So I actually think we can pretty comfortably spend up for today. So not really into the lower salary guys. Jerry, anybody the Mets batters you like, and do you think Barrios will do well? So Barrios, he's facing the Rays. They're a high strikeout team, but they also have a lot of lefties. Barrios tends to struggle with lefties. They're a good team overall, and Barrios not a massive priority for me. So I'm not going to be super high on him because the struggles with lefties and just thinking there are better options elsewhere. And do I like any of the Mets batters? So they're facing Jake Woodford. Woodford is not a dude we've seen a whole lot. We've seen him mostly in the bullpen, but he got some ground balls when he was in the minors. He had some ground balls in the bullpen as well. Let's pull up the larger sample on Woodford because the sample I have on the sheet is just 4 starts. But let's check out and filter in the minor league numbers and the bullpen numbers. See a 23% fly ball rate allowed in AAA, 32% in the majors if you include his time in the bullpen. So I'm okay being lower on them. Not a super great offense to begin with, but then also facing a guy who can get some ground balls. So I think they're more not really on my map for today. Diffuse asking about the Dodgers. Dodgers facing Luke Weaver. Weaver has made 2 starts back. He's gone 79, 78 pitches. Hasn't been like amazing by any means. So the Dodgers, I would say, are consideration diffuse because they're very good. So I think that's a positive here, but I'm not going to prioritize them over the Yankees, over the Astros, over the Phillies. So they're kind of like a stack after that. I would say the Nationals probably above them too because of the upside versus Luzardo. But yeah, I think they're a consideration. Savon, how would you stack the Oakland A's? Let's see if there's a lineup out yet for them. I was worried about the weather this morning. Doesn't look as bad now. I would always, as always, recommend you check out the forecast by Kevin Roth of Roto Grinders once he updates that later on today, because he is much smarter than I am. And he would have a better read on the weather situation there. As of right now, not super concerned about that, but check back what he says later on. Okay, so Matt Chapman banged up, so he's not in lineup for today. We do have Matt Olson in there, so he's gonna be the first guy we add on. It's really hard to stack the A's without using Olson just because he's so good. So I want to get him in there. Seth Brown is batting 6th. I find that very interesting because Seth Brown, not a bad hitter, and doesn't always play. When he does play, he tends to produce. Seth Brown versus righties, a 260 ISO, 52% fly ball rate, can steal some bags as well. So to me, I'd say Seth Brown's actually the first or the second guy I put in here. Is he minimum? He is minimum. How is that true? Okay. Why did I put him in utility? That was stupid. See, oh yeah, he's first base / outfield. So let's put Seth Brown in the outfield. Minimum salary. Oh my goodness. What am I doing here? I can put him in the outfield. Let's put him in the outfield. Let's do this. Bang. All right. Matt Olson, Seth Brown. I think those are the first two guys you start with in terms of stacking the A's for today. Other guys, my boy Jed, not a big power guy. Sean Murphy tends to be kind of interesting. He's got 213 ISO versus righties. Good batted ball data. Kind of don't hate that. It does lock up your utility because I'm assuming you have Olsen in there as well. But like, hey, you know, it can kind of get you flexibility. Like if you want to go Altuve, Bregman, Correa, you put Siri in there. It's a pretty fun lineup. So I think Brown and Murphy, both really good value options for today on that team. Then we're choosing between Canna. We could go with Starling Marte. Probably those two guys, Canna or Marte. So do we want the Marte parte or do we want to go with Canna? I'm going to go with Marte just because I got the salary to get there. And if we do that, spelled it wrong. Good job. That works. I think this is your 4-player stack for the A's. A little stars and scrubs type action, but both Brown and Murphy to me are really viable value options for today. Dan says, I'm also looking at the Atlanta and the White Sox stacks. Yeah, I think that the White Sox are good. They're fine, just not as high as the other ones. Rob, thoughts on a Houston stack? Altuve, Bregman, Tucker, and Alvarez. If you can fit all 4 of those guys, do it. I don't think I can for today because I'm going to be spending a pitcher, but I like all of them. And again, then a Houston stack, Jose Siri, and I'm also good with McCormick. So Rob, they kind of fit. Even if you can't get to those guys, I think that they're totally fine. I like Houston a lot for today. Jerry, do you think Atlanta and the Colorado game will be a slugfest? Last series against them, I think all games went over 10 runs. I think that series might have been in Colorado. That would influence things because it's a much better run scoring environment. Atlanta's not bad, but Colorado's better than literally everything. Let's see you got John Gray versus Tukey. Tukey's pretty volatile, so I wouldn't mind some one-offs on the Rockies. The problem is it's hard to get a full stack in there because they're really bad. So I could see some one-offs on the Rockies, but that's kind of it for me for there. Savon asking about a Toronto stack for today. They're facing Drew Rasmussen, low strikeout guy, does get some ground balls. He's had good results. So I do want to note that because there are some guys who just out from their peripherals. Rasmussen may wind up being one of those guys, but not the worst profile for stacking against. So Toronto's an option, Savon, not out on them. Any under the radar stacks for today? So let's check out the implied totals here because that tends to be how you can identify which teams will be more under the radar. Try to look for teams with lower totals, not like the top end totals, and see who's flying under the radar there. So the Yankees, Astros, White Sox should be pretty popular. Phillies probably will because of the value there. So the A's might actually be a pretty good under the radar stack for you, Savon. The Giants, the Nationals. I would say if you're looking for teams I like enough and don't have super high implied totals, Washington, San Francisco, Oakland, the top ones there. Let's talk to Salvatore. Rangers under the radar, I think. I think they're facing Greinke. Yeah, Greinke has not been great so far this year. He's also coming out the COVID IL, so not sure what things may look like for him after missing some time. I just don't like that offense overall. That's the one concern, but I think the spot is okay. I'm not going to stack them, Salvatore, because I just don't like their offense very much. I stacked them last night. It was very painful. Tried not to do that again. But, there is some uncertainty around Greinke, which could help there. DJ is asking about a guy on that team, asking about Culberson. Is he in the lineup for today? Yeah, batting 8th. Probably not. Going to try not to get there. And then with our boy Yanni, let's see where he's at. Yeah, batting 9th. He was staring right at his name. Not sure why to search for it. I would try not to, DJ, personally. Alvin, are you locking in Phillies as a 3-man stack for single entry? Potentially, because that means I can get to everyone. I would say, though, Alvin, I might prefer a 4-player stack from the Phillies because A, I can do it, and B, that means I get Harper. You could go with 2 of the value guys. Like maybe you go, let's try this here. Let's go with whoopsies, didn't want the Orioles. Let's go with just Miller and just Didi and go Harper without Odubel Herrera and see where we're at there. I can't spell. I'm playing on the computer because my typing's not great. Okay, if we could go with just those three guys, 3140 left. If you go with Jose Siri, that puts you up to 3425. Kind of don't mind that. So you could go with like three more Astros, get Altuve, get Bregman in there, or get McCormick in there too. I think that a 3-player stack, as long as it includes Harper, Alvin, I really don't want to do a 3-player stack that omits Harper. I think that's kind of the stipulation for me for today. So if you get Harper in there, yes, I think that a 3-player stack works, and you can go with like a one-off on the Yankees or something like that. But I think that 4, very viable for the Phillies for today. DJ says rain all day for the Royals. A's game, don't play that game. I would check again with the forecast via Kevin Roth because he is a meteorologist. I am not. As of right now, dark sky weather says, yeah, it's going to be raining there again. So see what he says. But that would ruin the A's under the radar thing. DJ, do you like Max Stassi? I like him in general. I think he's a good player. Today, he is facing Giolito. So no, don't want to go there against Giolito. Jerry, do you think pitching tonight will be at a minimum and big bats probably will get off tonight? Just a gut feeling. I think that because Cole is not a lock, there is a route for that happening. The good thing I would say, though, Jerry, is you can use the big bats and use Eovaldi and use Stroman and use Montas, guys like that, because of the value guys. So I would say like the big stacks can still pay off while you use a higher salary pitcher. That's what I would say there. So yeah, I think that it's very real because I love the Astros, I love the Yankees. That could very well happen, but I would try to get in both. Porque no los dos. DJ, can you do a Philly stack, Blue Jays, Padres stack with Cole as a pitcher? Probably not Blue Jays, just because I feel like the salaries would be a bit prohibitive there. That'd be my concern there. As far as the Padres go, they're facing Anthony DeSclafani. Really good at suppressing our contact. Tough park for tonight. So I would say a Philly stack with like McCormick and Siri, that might be the way I want to play things here. Because if you go with Cole, Siri, McCormick, and then those 3 value Phillies, you're kind of cooking pretty fun there. So I would check that out for me personally. Alvin, how do you rank the stacks for single entry? So for single entry, I'm going to Eovaldi. I know that. Guaranteed, because I don't think he'll be all that popular. I feel like I tend to be higher on Eovaldi than most do. So I can go Eovaldi, feel good about that. Under the assumption I go Eovaldi, I still want to go Phillies, I think, just because I get so much value there. And I think probably the Astros. I know that might be a little bit chalky given the Astros and the Phillies both have pretty high implied totals, but I do like them. If you want to go a bit more contrarian there, Alvin, which is totally fine, I think that I would consider the A's if we get the all clear on that weather. Salvatore says, it seems like the wind is always 10 plus mile per hour out in San Francisco. It is. I would say that the stadium is built to counteract that. I think that they knew when they were building it that it would constantly be blowing out, and they kind of built it to counteract the wind intentionally. So I don't tend to care about wind in San Francisco because it's kind of negated by the park. So I would keep that in mind there. Jerry says Cole may be on a pitch count due to that injury. Yes, it's not just the pitch count, Jerry. It's also that he might re-injure himself. He threw a bullpen, and the reason that like if he were healthy, I wouldn't care about pitch count was because he went 70 pitches 7 days ago, which to me says he's probably going to have a pretty close to a full leash. When Cole came off the COVID IL, he came right back and just went nuts. So if you could guarantee me, Jerry, that his hamstring were fully healthy right now, I would say no concerns. Be good with him, but I can't guarantee that. So it is concerned that maybe they roll him out in short order. Maybe he re-injures. Those are the two concerns. And those are the reasons why I am okay putting Eovaldi above him. But I do still think he's worth exposure for tonight because the upside is still very good. Savon, what stacks pair well with each other for upside and for more FanDuel points? Pairing well together is a good question because a lot of times stacks don't mesh. Like the White Sox don't mesh really well with the Royals because the White Sox have a lot of catcher / first baseman you want to use between Grandal, Abreu, et cetera. And then with the Royals, you want to use Salvador Perez every time. So I think it's more about positional mesh than other stuff. Specifically, looking at teams that have a lot of overlapping positions. So I think that for today, I think that the Astros and the Phillies mesh really well because with the Astros, you're trying to get to Altuve, Bregman, and other guys. With the Phillies using catcher / first base. I don't really care about Gurriel against a righty, so that's fine. Shortstop, I'm okay using Gregorius over Correa, and like there's not a ton of outfielders I want to use. So like I think that the Phillies and the Astros mesh really well positionally. I think that's a fun thing for today. Okay, home run calls from Jerry and DJ. Let's start with DJ. He says his home run calls are Alfonso Rivas, Josh Rojas, Jonathan Villar, and Yadier Molina. DJ going totally off the board. Jerry says Rizzo homer, Gallo homer, Soto homer, Harper homer, and Thomas homer. The theme for the first three is lefty on lefty. I think the Gallo one's pretty good, Jerry, because he's in a slump. I think that he could come out of it tonight. He does hit the ball well versus lefties. And then you also have the lefty on lefty with Soto there. I like Harper a lot. My home run call this morning was, I think it was Giancarlo Stanton. And the other one was, I don't recall. Was it Didi? I think it was Didi. So we'll stick with those for today. DJ asking about Stroman against St. Louis. Yes, I think he's the number 3 pitcher for today. Do like him. Also, that's about Barrios against Tampa Bay. A little bit warier there because of the number of lefties they have. Salvatore says Eric Fetty had 10 strikeouts versus Miami last time with a quality start. Fetty's actually been better recently than I like to give him credit for. This is over his past 10 starts with more sliders, 23% strikeout rate. It's pretty good. So I don't think that's a bad thing to bring up, Salvatore, because he's been pretty good. He's been better than perception, I would say. I'll put it that way. So good of you to point that out. Jerry says Segura home run, and then Shane has his boring calls. Our Stanton and Harper, I love both those, Shane. The fun ones, Miller and Dahlbeck. Dahlbeck sat last night. It bothered me, Shane. I'm very mad about that still. But facing a lefty, a low strikeout lefty specifically, who lets him fly balls, Bobby Big Flies. I dig it, Shane. I'm on board with all 4 of those. I think they're great. Salvatore says Adolis Garcia home run. Facing off with Greinke, low strikeout guy. Garcia can hit dingers. No objections here. I'm going to stick with mine with Giancarlo and Didi. We'll see how those go for tonight. That is all that we have here for today on the MLB DFS Q&A. But tomorrow, different schedule. It's the one day of the week we don't have NFL. So our MLB Q&A is at 4 as opposed to 4:30. So come by early tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Swing by. We'll talk about tomorrow's main slate and get you set for that. Here are the pitchers for that one. Couple undecideds. Probably going to be bullpen games, but there are your pitchers for tomorrow in case you want a sneak peek at that. If you've got more questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. Big thank you to JJ Zacharyson, who was hosting with me earlier on, taking your waiver wire questions. Check out JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB and also on the Late Round podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to Joy Affleck, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Joy, once again, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you tonight. Good luck with waivers and also good luck with your MLB DFS lineups. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow at 4 p.m. This has been the FanDuel Live Q&A.